Kava's the one that teaches people like, oh, wow, a plant can work.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. I met Beth many years ago at the International Herb Symposium. In fact, I just realized in contacting her recently that her contact name in my phone is still Beth IHS, although by now I definitely know her much better than an IHS reference. I got to hang out with her last year in Austin, and I'm looking forward to teaching for her at a women's retreat in the Austin area in next May of 2025. When I asked her to be on the show, she immediately knew what plant she wanted to share about. And as you'll see, this is a plant that has been supporting her since day one of her herbal journey. For those of you who don't already know her, Beth's passion for nature blossomed during her childhood on her family farm, where she roamed the woods collecting treasures like bluebells and savoring red clover blossoms. A sun worshiper at heart, she left the snow behind at 26 to move to the desert, where she discovered the Southwest Institute for Healing Arts. There, she studied herbalism, hypnotherapy, aromatherapy, and astrology, earning an associate's degree in holistic healthcare with a focus on Western herbalism under the guidance of Joanne Sanchez. Beth has worked for Whole Foods, Herb Shops, Dr. Hauschka, and many other herbal companies. In 2012, she fulfilled her dream by opening Sacred Moon Herbs in Dripping Springs, Texas. Beth, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know we are going to have a lively conversation because I think you probably have lively conversations with everybody you talk to, but my experience is that the two of us have lively conversations. So I'm excited for it. And we've just already heard in your bio, like some things about how you started on this plant path. And I'd love to hear more specifics, like perhaps about the farm and how you found herb school. So wherever you'd like to start, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for having me. I'm excited to share about the plants. I give my grandma credit really for being the first herbal teacher. I was one of those lucky kids that got to grow up across the field from my grandma's on my dad's side. And grandma and grandpa had 160 acres and they were on the first 40 and we were on the second 40. So I got to walk across the field. Sometimes it'd be corn, sometimes it'd be red clover, sometimes, it'd be soybeans. It depends on what they were growing. But I was able to share that experience with grandma, and she had many, many grandchildren, but I was just the lucky one across the field and got to hang out with her a lot. She's passed over now, but she's still very much a big part of my life. So I give her credit for being my first herbal teacher in regards to, she had us pick the dandelion leaves out of the yard, where we didn't do that across the field at my family's house, although my parents were big gardeners. So that's just kind of where it started. And then I don't know if my Aunt Barb, who was her daughter, or if my uncles taught me about red clover. I wish I could remember who taught me that trick, but we would always pick it and suck the sugar out of it. And it was like a big thing. And so I teach, I just flew home in May, and my niece has 4 kiddos. And one of the little ones is like, she just calls it the purple flower because she doesn't know red clover because she's 5. And she's like, can we suck the sugar out of the clover? So it's a family tradition at this point.
Nice. Do you have any sense, Beth, of like a lineage there, like going back farther than your grandmother? Like where,
yeah,
because I imagine that it's probably, there was more going on, ancestrally there.
Yeah. And then, as an adult, I found out that we were just poor farmers, basically, like poor in, I was a kid, so I didn't understand the concept of paying bills, but rich in land, but poor in money, I guess is how you would say it. I'm so grateful for it now because I don't think I would be on this path had I not started there. I was fortunate to live in the same house for 18 years before I graduated high school early and moved away. Yeah, so I think, I give great honor for that. On both sides of the family, we didn't come from money, so they were both farmers. On my mom's side, they were always doing things. I found out after that grandma died that she was a dorm parent for a college for many years, and one of the kids wrote on Facebook just honoring her and saying something about, we always loved Coralie's blackberry something elixir whenever we had diarrhea. And I was like, wait, what? I had no clue that grandma had anything to do with like herbal medicine. And she's not here to ask her now. But I know we're talking about herbs, but I'll share this very quick story about lineage. Spirit shows up in interesting ways in my life, and I'm a firm believer in trusting at this point. So a long, long time ago, when I was in my 20s, I worked at Kinko's, and this is in Arizona. And a new mall was opening down the road, and it was Barnes and Nobles. They were having their grand opening. They were having this author for a book signing. I had no clue who she was. I think I probably was in herb school, but it was kind of a new journey for me. And this lady, when she picked up her order for her book signing stuff, she tried to tell me, and I was very, very busy, and there was a long line, and she was trying to tell me like there was a spirit around me. And again, I was just busy and was just kind of like, next, next, next. And she said, well, is your grandma still alive? And I said, yes. And she said, well, ask her about Harriet or like she was doing these H names. It was a woman. And I know that side of my family all the way back to like the 1800s in Germany. So I was very much like, oh, okay, like whatever, next. So I used to call grandma every Sunday, and I called her, and my grandma's a diehard Catholic, and we're very different in a lot of things spiritually. But I said, I know, grandma, you're not going to believe in this, but this lady, she told me to ask you about, is there a Harriet in our family? Like she's kind of my guardian angel, or she's floating around me. And grandma said, oh, sure, Aunt Henrietta. And I was like, who's Aunt Henrietta? And she was the old maid, is what grandma said. And she was basically the love of her life, died in World War I. And so she never, ever fell in love again. And she just took care of the community and was like the old maid, meaning like she didn't get married, but she, brought food and herbs and took care of the community and sat with the sick. So yeah, now that I know about her, I have pictures of her on my altar, and I talk to her a lot. So I feel like she's, my lineage of herbalism and caretaking.
And did she live in the US or did she live in Germany or?
So no, she did. She lived in Quincy, Illinois.
Okay.
And she was, so part of that story, which I'm sorry I'm leaving out, the person that said that, the famous author that I had no clue who it was, that was Doreen Virtue. I don't know, like if you're in the spiritual community, you would have known about her. She's written probably like 40 books and card decks, and has since left like the spiritual community. But at the time, she was really big in that community. So yeah, once I found out like who she was later, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's pretty cool.
Wow.
So yeah, a weird way to find out about your lineage, but
yeah, that is a very original one for sure. So you had kind of like introduction to plants and thinking they were cool as a kid. And how did you find your way to actually studying them for medicine?
So again, that's an interesting story. So I am not a snow girl. Like I was born in Illinois, but I don't do cold. I like sun. And so I packed up at 26 and I moved. Phoenix was the hottest place in the country that I knew of, and I knew one person there. So I packed up, sold everything, whatever fit in my grand damn car. This is before cell phones. Drove across the country. Had my house plant, my tree plant in my passenger side the whole way, and ended up in Arizona. And so within like the first 6 or 7 months I was there, I found this metaphysical store. which I had never been in something like that before, in Scottsdale. It was called Vision Quest. It might still be there. It was when I moved to Texas. It was still in existence. And they had like this little newspaper, like it was just like this folded newspaper, and it had classes in it. My whole life I've been into astrology. I've loved astrology. My class ring when I was 16 had Scorpio sign on it. So they had this astrology class, and I was like, it was a big, huge deal to me to find a college that was offering astrology. I didn't know that existed. So I signed up. When I went there for class to pay for it and sign up, I think I can't remember exactly how the story went, but I must have had to pay in like half, because when I went there to start the class, they said, well, there wasn't enough students to sign up, but we're going to put you in Western herbalism. I had no clue what Western herbalism was.
Interesting.
And what I realized later on in life is that they were, a brand new school, and they needed students, right? So I got placed in Joanne Sanchez, who is one of my dearest friends now. I got placed in her Western Herbalism Foundation class. And you can ask Joanne stories about that, because I'm sure she was like, why is this girl in my class? I was just so curious about everything, because, I wasn't signing up for herb class. I was signing up for astrology, and it just opened this whole world.
So I'm curious, Beth, I'm just like personality-wise, were you just like, okay, I'll go to Western herbalism class then? Like,
yeah.
you were just game? Because I could be like, I could just see myself being like, wait, no, like I signed up for another class, but you were just down. You're like, okay, I'm going with the flow on this one. Awesome.
Yeah. I was so broke then too. I don't know why I didn't ask for my money back, but I was like, all right,
Wow.
yeah. And then, that was the foundation class, and that's required still for her program. It's still in existence through SWIHA, Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, in Tempe, Arizona. And so then at the time, the program that she offered, this was in 97. So her program was 500 hours, I think. I think it's 800 or 900 now. But it was a 2-year program of herbalism and bioscience, and it wasn't easy. Joanne's a very, very hard teacher, and I'm very grateful for it now. She's amazing. So that's how I got on the herbal path.
Awesome. And I know from your bio and from other conversations, you worked for a lot of shops and stuff. I think even back then and even now, it could be hard to like find a job as an herbalist, but you somehow made that work.
It's funny that you should say that, because the career part of Joanne's program, after I had graduated, I went back and helped assist in the medicine making class, just as assistant. And eventually she had me teach like the career day, because I was trying out so many things. And it wasn't because I was just, I was a little curious, but it was really, like you said, there was no jobs in herbalism. Like, you graduated, and it was like, what do I do? I was fortunate enough so Joanne, within her program, at least at the time, she had a brilliant, the whole program she laid out really, really wisely. And so we had to do externships. So I picked, there was a list, and I picked Whole Foods, and I picked, and this is back in the day when Whole Foods was Whole Foods, and a local herb shop. So we had to do, I can't remember how many hours, but we had to do X amount of hours. And, the person that we checked in with had to sign off to prove that we attended. And then I was fortunate enough that after those externships, they hired me. So I worked 1 day a week at Desert Sage Herbs in Chandler, Arizona, mother-daughter owned wonderful herb shop, holistic center, and then Whole Foods. And I stayed with Whole Foods for a while because they had insurance, and that was something that you don't find as an herbalist, really. And then Whole Foods opened so many doors to me, because back then, I know it's not true now, but back then it was like an herbal education on top of another college education. The sales reps came in every week and would train you. And it's back before, like in the old days when New Chapter was New Chapter, and, Dr. Hauschka. So I ended up, when I left Whole Foods, it was because of those connections that I was able to work for. I did demos for Herb Farm for a while. Dr. Hauschka, I worked for 10 years, eventually being their herbal educator for their staff, and doing like events and fun stuff. Yeah, Eclectic. I used to work for Eclectic a long, long, long time ago. Yeah, there, yeah. And then I helped teach at the school too. So I just kind of bounced around, and a lot of those jobs were one day a week. Whole Foods was a little bit more, but when I left them, I literally had, I don't know, 9, 10 jobs at once.
Wow.
Some of them were, teach once a week. Some were, go train this staff once a month. Like, yeah, I just piecemealed it together as an independent contractor.
Wow, that's a lot of piecemealing. But I'm imagining you just had a really breadth of experience there in a lot of different capacities.
Yeah. I met a lot of amazing people. Yeah, both from my boss side to who I was training, or teaching, or yeah, it was a great experience. Exhausting. I couldn't do it at this age, but.
And at what point where did you think I want my own herb store? Like when did that dream first begin for you?
Really, I worked at Desert Sage for 5 years, and it was there. That's in Arizona, and so moving to Texas was not. I wasn't planning on leaving Arizona, and then one of my best friends moved to Texas, who I went to herb school with, and then within 2 years we flew over, and she lived on an organic farm. And the mothership of Whole Foods is in Austin, and yeah, I mean, she just showed me the best of the best of the best. And months later, I mean, on the flight home, my husband's like, "Let's do this. Let's just leave. Let's pack up. Let's start over." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's how I left all those herb jobs, was by moving. But I always knew when I worked at the Holistic Center, like there was 10 of us girls back then. And we were family. We were so tight. And yeah, I knew like I wanted something like that. I didn't know how it was going to happen. And then I worked 2 years in Austin at an herb shop called the Herb Bar that still exists. Both of those herb shops still exist. And then I told Tara, I mean, that was who we moved to Texas. Why? This is what I wanted to do. And she's like, "Let's do it." And she is like my big sister. She's 10 years older than I am. And she had the knowledge, and she understood how to really get things, the paperwork going and the bank account going. And yeah, and I had worked in herb shops by 7 years, maybe by then, 8 years. Yeah, and I always wanted an herb shop and a gift shop together. Like that's always, you'll see, hopefully, I mean, if everything works out. So I always wanted astrology and herbs and, magic. I just wanted all that together, and tarot cards, and yeah.
And
so
it
happened.
12 years old now.
It is.
Sacred name, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I do look forward to hopefully seeing that sometime soon, but we can chat about that later. I would love to dive into your chosen herb. I know this is an herb that's very special to your heart. So where would you like to begin with Kava Kava?
I think, I'll start at the beginning where I first had the experience with Kava, and that was in herb school. Joanne, and again, this was a very long time ago. So her classes were smaller, is why I say that. Now they're huge. But we had a Kava ceremony on the desert floor. Again, this is the schools in Tempe, Arizona. That's one of the many, many, many cities within the valley of Phoenix. And Joanne took us up to a very special place called Carefree. Literally, that's the name of it, Carefree, Arizona. And we were in Happy Valley. So we went up to this park. It was our second class we ever had together. And, we had signed up to spend 2 nights or 2 years together. And it was brilliant. And I've thanked her many, 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 many times for this. We sat on circle on the desert floor, and we passed Kava tinctures. And I can't tell you, I'm sure Herb Farm was one of them, and probably Eclectic, because a long time ago, Joanne worked for Eclectic as well. So we have similar backgrounds when we started talking about it later in life. And we passed Kava tinctures over and over and over in the circle, just going around and around and around. There's probably about 18 of us maybe. And she did that on purpose because she wanted us to just, how I would say it now, is to sink into our hearts and let our anxiety of not knowing anyone. We're all strangers. And it was brilliant because then we passed we passed a talking stick around the circle, and each person could take as long as they wanted to. And yeah, it was amazing. It was a big lesson on how it just lowers your walls and lets you speak from your heart. And some people cried. Some people said things where they were like, they would say, I've never told anyone this story. And I mean, what a brilliant way to join a circle together that's going to spend 2 years together. It was beautiful.
Real bonding experience.
Yeah. So that was my first introduction to Kava. Yeah. Thank you, Joanne.
And then you were taken with it from there.
Yeah. I just, just like a lot of 20-year-olds, well, all ages these days, but back then I feel like, in your 20s, you're trying to find your path and you're not comfortable in your skin and there's a lot of anxiety. And, that was the time in my life that I really, really, Kava just kind of yelled at me and said, hey, pay attention. To pay for college, I waited tables and bartended for many, many years. So that's a whole different side than being in the holistic world, of course. So yeah, it was a duality for sure. And then when I started working at Whole Foods, Joanne, she was really great about bringing in, back in the day, when I went through the program, she brought in the sales rep for Arizona's, for Gaia Herbs. And her name was LaDawn. She was the rep for 100 years there. And then Lair was the rep for Herb Farm. And then there was, I can't remember the rep for New Chapter, but she brought them in to educate us on their companies and their practices back then. And so I know that Lair brought Kava and passed it around so we could all, and Herb Farm's, it's still my favorite Kava. It's potent. It's really strong. I still dilute it to put it directly in my mouth. That's a lot. That's an emergency when I do that. So yeah, so then I started working for Lair, and I was doing demos at all these different co-ops and Whole Foods, and back then Wild Oats still existed. Sprouts didn't exist. It was called Sunflower. So there was a lot going on. And then so I would just show up and do like these 3-hour demos for the public, and they just drop by and say, what's this? And, sometimes it'd be peppermint spirits with Kava. Like, I was always pairing it with Kava because it had such an effect on my life for my anxiety, and my stress, and getting comfortable in my skin is what I would say. And then I worked for Eclectic for a while, and they don't make it, unfortunately. I need to make this on my own. And I keep telling myself this whenever I talk about it, but they had the most brilliant combination. It was Kava and maple syrup. It was a tincture, and it was so easy to sell too, because people would like it. It took away the bitterness of the Kava, and it made it pleasant. And people would just they would take it, and then they'd I'd say, walk around the store for like 10 minutes and, drop back by and tell me how you feel. And then they would come back. And another reason I love Kava so much, because I've been working with the public for over 20 years with herbs. And, I still to this day get the question, do herbs really work? Like at least once a week, if not a day. And, Kava is the one that teaches people oh, wow, a plant can work. So they'd walk around the store and then swing back by and be like, wow, I think this is really working. And I'm like, it is, so it was really cool to see that shift so quickly. So I just worked at many different companies that had the plant. And that's really how I met the plant, was by working for the bigger companies. And Eclectic even used to have this Kava, and I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was called Kava Kolada or if it was called Kava smoothie, but they actually had a powdered drink where I would have to buy coconut milk and mix it in there and then serve a drink. So yeah, I've had Kava in many, 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 many ways from different companies. That was my introduction for the plant that way.
And you're saying, in your 20s, it helped you to be more comfortable in your skin, helped with anxiety, but this is something you've continued to work with Kava for many years. So you've grown together.
I will tell you the stress in society has only gotten worse from my perspective of being, I've worked in herb shops for 20 years now. For me, like from my perspective, herb shops are like triage herbalism. I've always felt that way. We're dealing with people straight off the street that either are in crises. So, I mean, there's many reasons people walk in the moon, but a lot of them don't know herbs yet. They're curious. They wonder what those 200 jars are on the wall. Like, um, you know, yeah, they're curious. And then the other part of what I seem to attract my whole life is grief and trauma and loss. So I can't kava, and I pair it with rose in those situations. But I cannot, I personally don't know if I would be on the planet without kava. I've experienced lots of grief, lots of loss, lots of death. And it's saved me. Like it really, when my grandma died, the one that grew up across the field from me, I was literally going into that funeral home's bathroom like every like 20 or 30 minutes and just like straight, like not diluted, and just trying to like calm down. Cause like, like when you experience that intense grief and loss and you're shocked, susto, you can't breathe. Like you can't catch your breath. You can't breathe. And always, 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 for me at least, many others, kava allows you to take a deep breath. Like it's not a magical elixir that takes away all your grief and pain, but it gives you a second to like breathe. So I have worked with it for myself in so many different emergencies. And then in 2010, whole nother story, but I decided to quit drinking alcohol completely, like wine, like everything. It was just a personal choice where I'd had plenty since high school, and I chose to not. And the first time that someone died and I didn't have a bottle of wine to grab and numb out, I didn't know what to do. Like I really was, it was an eye opener for me. And it was kava and I did a lot of herbal baths and, but kava allowed me to breathe and calm down. So, it's one of my top favorite herbs for grief. Public speaking, flying, relaxation, drinking kava chai right here as we're talking to each other, because I've never been on camera before. This is my first time, so I was a little nervous, and I'm like, oh, you should be drinking kava while you talk about kava.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for being brave and for being here, Beth.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I teach classes on kava. I could give you 1,000 of examples where I've seen it in front of my own eyes with customers, in very acute grief and trauma where something has just happened and they run to moon, and I've given them a shot of kava with some rose and just said, here, like, sit with this for a second, so I can hear, like, they can quit crying and tell me what's happened to them. So it gets you back in your body. It's like Olympia, but liquid herbs. Yeah.
It's really fascinating to me that you're having a lot of people come into Sacred Moon that are not familiar with herbs and they're curious, like somehow they're being drawn there. That's just fast. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would assume, that herb shops are made of a lot of regulars, and that people aren't
both
wandering in just saying like, oh, what do we have here? I love that, because it's very much like the front lines. Like you're there to be like, all right, we'll start from the beginning.
Every day it's herbs 101, and I don't mind it. And then in there we do have our regulars, and we do have our herbalists that come in. We have a couple of herb schools, and their students come in, and they're a blast to work with because they've just found herbs and they're so excited, and that makes me excited again. And it's all walks of life, but there are still tons of people that are like, are those spices on the wall? And I'm like, well, yes, but and then I do my spiel and say, this and this, and have them smell them. And depending on a tea that I have brewed up in the kitchen, sometimes I'm like, do you want to try this tea? Like, that's what I'm drinking today. Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah, there's tons of people that have no clue about herbal medicine still.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that too. Sometimes, I don't know, I'll hear someone say like, "Oh, there's too many herbalists," or something to that effect. I'm like, there's so many people in this world, in United States alone, who have no idea about herbs. Like we're not anywhere close to that yet. Um,
No.
yeah. I don't believe in it as a concept, but we're still very far from it anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so
I
I
agree
hear,
with you.
yeah, yeah, we got a ways to go. So in your stories, you've talked a lot about tinctures and using tinctures of kava a lot. You mentioned the powder once as well. I'm wondering if you could just give any like practical tips on, maybe additional ways. We also need to talk about your recipe, but ways you can work with kava. And also, we should probably cover some basics because there might be someone out there who's like, "Oh, I heard kava was hepatotoxic or just toxic in general." So we should cover that as well. I just threw a bunch of stuff at you, but
Yeah.
hopefully grab onto something there, Beth, and we'll start from there.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. Those are all good points. So yes, tincture, kava, or tincture, powder. We've offered dark chocolate organic kava bars. Kava comes in so many forms these days, and so different people like different ways to do it. Like I said, I was introduced with my first experience was the tinctures, the elixirs. So that was my first experience. I've worked a lot with the powder, like I do a Kava Kolada recipe that we'll talk about at some point with both. I have yet to take a bath with kava, but I love baths are like my favorite way, herbal baths to heal, and it's on the list to actually do that. I've done topical oil with kava. So aside from anxiety of taking kava, what I've personally noticed over the years, I had a very strange illness in 2020, and it wasn't COVID, or if it was a very different weird branch of it. But I had excruciating nerve pain. David Winston's actually the only person I've ever known is on the herbal side to speak about this, but like my nerves burned from the inside of me. It was very, very painful. And one of the herbs that worked for me was kava. And I don't know it as a, like as a gentle, mild, like muscle relaxer. Yes. Like I've used that many times when I'm in a car for 16 hours or something like that to like make my back feel better. But for actual like firing, painful nerve pain, kava surprised me. So it's still after you're working with this plant for 20 years, it still surprises me. So there are other reasons that
Beth, I have to interrupt you and ask about the other herbs because I know someone is going to wonder, like, what are because someone out there is like, my nerves burn. What are the other herbs? So I have to ask.
Oh, for that, well, that was a whole protocol.
Yeah, I'm sure.
With every elder teacher I've ever had that you can imagine that you're friends with too, were supporting me. Rosalee is one of my main teachers from Ecuador. She was supporting me from afar. I had an acupuncturist. I mean, you name it. Like I was not ready to leave the planet yet. And I fought to stay on this planet really, really hard, which comes with age, maybe. I don't know. There were many times that I didn't fight to leave. So, yeah, I mean, of course, oats. I took just copious amounts of oats internally. I took multiple, it didn't work for 3 months because I couldn't. All my amazing sisters stepped up and kept Moon alive, or Moon would have closed down. And I took baths, so many times a day with oats and chamomile and the protocols were endless. And then Dr. Ryan is Western and Chinese herbs. So he was giving me formulas that I was drinking like literally like 10 times a day. My dosing was, it was my job, was like to do that. So every nervine you can possibly think of, every herb to help bring down inflammation, lots of kava to keep my stress down, because I've also taken a lot of death doula classes too, and there will come a time, I think that will be my journey in life, is to be a death doula, and kava will be there for that as well. So when you have that much fear of dying, like Kava calms you down and lets your brain say, no, I'm not, I'm gonna, I'm gonna rise up. I'm gonna beat this. I'm gonna be okay. Because another thing that Kava does, and I love passion flower for this too, is when your brain's spinning out and like, there's tapping, there's so many different tools that we know in the holistic field to calm that spinning brain. But for me and a lot of my customers, passion flower and Kava together create those circular, when you're spinning out, it's just kind of like, it calms it down. So those were many, many, many herbs and that I worked with. And I didn't eat sugar for 2 years. To like help rebuild my nerves.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. As soon as I asked that, I was, thought of like some part of my origin stories. I had a terminal autoimmune disease. And so I get asked all the time, like, what are the herbs that helped with that? And I'm like, I just can't even like begin.
Just need to type up a list and be like, here.
Yeah, it was very complicated and amidst much of the protocol. So I just did the same thing to you. My apologies, but it was like
that's all right. It's part of being an herbalist. It's, we're curious.
Yeah, we have to know.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So about Kava, so there is misinformation out there, and I had to deal with this when I started Whole Foods a long, long time ago, over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We had warning signs up about Kava. Like in the old days that I'm told, like Rosemary tells me about when that was happening. What was it? The 70s, the 80s with comfrey. And, she'll talk about like, she owned her own herb shop in the 70s. So we talk a lot about like how that's changed and what it looks like. She's been in my herb shop and, an herb shop's an herb shop, but a lot has changed in those years. And so when I started Whole Foods, we had to have signs up, or at least Whole Foods told us we had to have signs up that gave us warning about Kava, which made our jobs very difficult on the floor because they would say, well, why are you selling it? Yet you have this warning sign up. Mm-hmm. So my boss was very, very supportive at the time. And I was the only herbalist on staff that had just graduated herb school. And I found the article from the professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, that had done this research. And it proved that they were using the wrong part of the plant. So I printed that out and just gave it to people like that were scared or curious. And I said, look, like, and of course, not everybody, Kava's not for everybody, just like, chamomile's not for everybody, or rose might not be for everybody. Although that one's a hard one because I think the world would be better off if we were all taking rose. But yeah, so, of course, there's steps to introducing any herb to any customer that you don't know that's just off the street. But with that, like, and I still have that paperwork at Moon for people that say, hey, this is mixed reviews. And I mean, at this point in life with the internet, there's mixed reviews on every single plant out there. And I mean, we deal with it all the time. So yeah, I would say, with Kava, and this is what I tell my customers, start out slow, start out with a low dose. Every bottle, of course, has the instructions on it, no matter who you're using. And, do like a half dropper, dilute it in a shot glass of water. Like we literally have these, you'll see them, these little shot glasses that say Sacred Moon. And then people are like, why do you have a shot glass at an herb shop? I'm like, they're for tinctures. They're not for alcohol. Like, I mean, alcohol's in tinctures, but, so we do water and then dilute it. And I always, always, always warn people with echinacea too, that their tongue's going to tingle. Otherwise, before I knew better, one of my friends has a peanut allergy. And when I gave her echinacea a long time ago in herb school, she has an EpiPen. So she freaked out because that was the feeling that peanuts do to her. Oh, wow. So that was a great lesson. I've learned so many lessons from my friends, my customers, my family. And so now, 20 years forward, I always about echinacea and Kava warn people that their tongue's going to become numb and tingle. And that's totally normal. Great to take before you go to the dentist too, for anxiety and to like go ahead and start numbing yourself. Mm-hmm. I always do that. So yeah, really that's what I would say. Start small. And that's true for really any herbs, I think. And then see how you do with that plant. Like I said, it saved me so many times for grief and loss. Yeah.
And you have this amazing recipe to share with us, Kava Kolada.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's
Yeah.
dive into that.
Yes. So that came really because I quit drinking alcohol, but all my girlfriends still drank wine, right? And I wanted to hang out, but then it was weird to like hang out and like not, just drink my water bottle, like weird for me and weird for them, which is kind of weird that it was weird for them. But we all had to have this conversation, and I was like, okay, well, I need like something to bring to like wine night, right? And so I started making Kava Coladas, and I'm sorry that I can't say the original recipe. I know it was like way back, like around herb school. And I know it was from Hawaii, and there was pineapple was the fruit. I do remember that. And they only used powder. So that's like started playing around with it. And then once now it's been like easily 15, maybe 20 years that I've been making these. So it started out with like a recipe like that. And then I was like, well, what would peaches do in it? What would, like you get those frozen organic bags of berries that have, the raspberries, blueberries, all those berries. And so I started playing with that. So for me, after years and years and years of doing that, I found cherries, which they do not grow down here. I know I would go nuts if I was in Washington. They're my favorite. And then I also started over the years, when I would bring that, like everybody's like, what are you drinking? I want to try it. So then all of a sudden everybody was drinking the Kava Coladas, not the wine. And then I would, like, my best friends, I'd be like, okay, wait, I only have so much of this. So some of them, they weren't herbalists, and they would complain about the bitterness still. So it's coconut, a fruit of your choice, and coconut milk, I should say, and the kava. And so I started putting a ripe, not like brown, but not green either, like that in between, like yummy tasting banana. I started just putting a whole banana into the blender to see if I could cut that bitterness. And it did. It worked really well. And then, like, my girlfriends that weren't herbalists were my guinea pigs, and I'd be like, hey, try this. So that's how, it's been tweaked forever. And I share that with customers. I'm like, do it however you want. Start here and tweak it and make it however you like. But yeah, so it's coconut milk, it's a ripe banana, I do kava powder and tincture. I do herb farms tincture. You could do whatever tincture speaks to you. And then I like cherries. So that's my favorite way to do it. And when I teach the Kava Bliss class, we make those in class and then share them. So yeah, I'll seek out frozen cherries.
Sounds blissful. Yeah. Sounds very blissful.
It's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And for the listeners, you can download your beautifully illustrated copy at herbswithrosalieepodcast.com or check out the show notes. Well, is there anything that we haven't yet talked about with kava that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I've learned from my elders about the kava plant. If you ever went to the International Herbal Symposiums back in the day, like Rosemary always had the kava fairies running around on Saturday nights with like little kava chais. I've learned kava from her. We've talked a lot about that. When I first started teaching, I would get like hot flashes is what I would call them, but it was just really adrenaline surges. And I'm used to talking to people, but not a lot of people. And when that started happening, I really turned to kava. And then I was talking to Rosemary one day, and then she said, I still take kava before I step in front of hundreds of people. And I'm like, wow, okay. If you're Rosemary Gladstar and you're still taking kava to like speak in front of people, okay, like I feel, okay, I'm doing this too. So yeah, I would say that, like, it's not, I don't take it every day. We had a tragic death in April, and I have been taking it on and off for months because of that situation, of that loss of losing Elle. So during great times of grief and trauma, I do take it regularly, daily. And then as I process, and I'm doing lots of other things, acupuncture, massage, tapping, laying on the earth. I love to swim. So there's a lot more than just taking some kava when grief is the issue. And then, some days, sometimes it could be you know, a month before I have kava and I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a colada, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, that would just be what I'd say about kava. It's not an everyday herb for me. No herb's really an everyday herb for me, but yeah, it's a best friend to me for sure.
I'm really getting a sense of that, Beth, like just this relationship that you've had with kava since the beginning of herbal days, and how you've grown with kava, and how you just really sense that how important the kava's been to support you through really hard times. And it's, I get the sense it's like this plant you can lean on,
Mhm.
and it's there for you. So thank you so much for sharing from your heart and from just all the ways kava has supported you. So I would like to hear about I don't know, what do you have going on, like herbal projects, classes? We could talk about something else, like another little thing I know that's going on, but yeah, let's hear about it.
Um, yeah, so I teach little classes, like 10 people. That's all we can fit inside Moon. It's 800 square feet. It's very, very tiny. So I've done that on and off for 10 years in the fall and the winter. Spring is way too busy. In summer, I typically head north to New Hampshire in August to Nancy Phillips's farm and do some trainings up there with my East Coast family. And so I do these mini classes. They start up 2 Sundays from now. I do it on Sundays when the shop is closed. And that's just fun. That's our local community, like hanging out, having fun, drinking tea. And then I was very, very inspired with the New England Women's Herbal Conference when that existed. And I would fly up there many, many years and loved it. It was the best 3 days of the year, like 800 women and just learning from all these elders. And yeah, it filled my cup up. And then I could come back home and just help people for 8 hours straight at the shop day after day. And then when that ended, a lot of us were really, really sad. And then I started flying up to Nancy's and seeing Rocio. She would do Heal the Healers in August. So I'd fly up there for both. And then I talked to Nancy and Rosemary and was like, hey, would you come down to Texas and like help me, like do this down there? And Rosemary, always being the wise person she is, she said, well, honey, that's your community. You do it. So I kind of swirled together the women's conference and then the Heal the Healers that Nancy and Rocio do, and just found a very beautiful location in Wimberley, Texas that I rent out. I don't have my own land like Nancy does, but that's on the list. I'm hoping to manifest that in the next couple of years. And we gather Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We spend the night there. It's a beautiful location. And I taught the first one, and then my teacher, Joanne Sanchez, flew over from Austin, Arizona, and then Rosemary and Rocio. And then you're coming down in May to teach our fifth one. It's 30 women's. I put a cap on it because you can still be very vulnerable and share your experiences in circle with that many people, we found out. We have an amazing chef, Jana, that cooks us beautiful food. And so that's been the last 3-4 years now that I've shifted gears and went that way. I know I'm not always going to have Moon. It's been 20 plus years I've been working in herb shops, and things are going to shift a little bit eventually. And so I want to teach. I have 2 books in my head I want to write eventually when I'm not working crazy hours at Moon. And I love learning. I love teaching, and I love being the student. So I just want to constantly keep sitting at the feet of the elders and learning. So that's kind of what I got going on along with running Moon.
That's wonderful. I was in Austin a year ago, and I got a brief introduction to a small snippet of the Austin herbal community, and that was really wonderful. And I'm excited to come back and see more. And herb shops are some of my favorite places on earth. They have been ever since I was a little girl, and they're just they can be such a pillar of the community and such a place of gathering and support. And so thank you for all of your work and providing that for your community.
We're fortunate where we live. When you visit, I'll of course take you to Moon, but also some of my friends have herb shops around, and you'll get to see. And we all do everything differently. The only thing I've ever found remotely common about an herb shop, and this is whether it's West Coast, East Coast, here, Illinois, wherever, is that typically the colors and sides are green and purple. Like that's like the colors that we were drawn to, and typically it's painted in those colors. Moon is too. Yeah, it's just that's the one thing that I find common.
That's interesting. I can think of a couple herb shops I've been to for sure that are purple and green. Yep.
Yeah, it's fun. I too, I love, that's the first thing I look when I fly in somewhere is like herb shop co-op. Like,
yep, absolutely. Yep. Well, before you go, I have one last question for you, Beth, and I'm so glad that this is your question. And that is, how do herbs instill hope in you?
Really through my customers, through my niece and nephew, through the younger generation, through all generations, yes, but I see the younger generation, especially since COVID, it's a mess for them. Their anxiety is insane. It's worse than I've ever seen it before for multiple reasons that would take us, a week to discuss. But I work with kids a lot in Moon because we have a lot of, like hippie stuff in there too. So they love Moon for those reasons. And then, they start talking about their anxiety, their suicidal thoughts. Like, I mean, they share a lot. And then I can see them with, lemon balm is a plant that I work a lot with them. Passion flower, rose, always rose. They love spritzers, like all that, always ask permission. But I'll say, like, can I spray you with some sacred ground, or can I spray you? We make spritzers with flower essences and essential oils and moon water that I make on the full moon in Scorpio in May. And I see what the plants can do. They're such sponges at that age too. And like, now anything witch is in, right? So like when I grew up, it was like, you still were kind of scared to say that word. Like it was, you're going to get the evil eye for saying it. And like now these kids are witch. Like it's just like, there's no fear around it anymore, which I think is amazing. And so they understand, they're finding out different ways to drink tea. They want to make their own blends. They want to bathe in it. It's really cool. So it gives me hope because I see the kids, and when I say kids, high schoolers or 20-year-olds, I see them being called to the plants. And, personally for me, this is my opinion. I feel like we're leaving them a big mess, and, we're trying to do our part as elders as what we can. But I also I'm really hopeful to teach them as much. I'll teach them every single thing that I have in my brain if I can, to help them with their own personal journey and with planting, doing gardens, and just helping out Mama Earth, So that's where my hope comes from, is that no matter how much doom and gloom the world is and what's happening all over everywhere, like I still, the plants give me hope, and it's through watching the next generations.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Beth. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And just what an interesting perspective you get to have by working with the public in the store and seeing who comes in and all the support you give. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've loved hearing about Kava from you. I feel inspired to work with Kava more, and and just hearing your story and all of just the gifts that you're sharing with your community has meant a lot. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed I really enjoyed this time together.
As always, thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card and to get a transcript of this show. There, you'll also be able to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. You can also find more from Beth at sacredmoonherbs.com. If you'd like more herbal episodes to head your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Nicole Paul is the project manager who oversees the whole operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes to actually uploading each episode and so many other things I don't even know. She really holds this whole thing together. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusikova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them. I know that you do too. Christy edits the recipe cards, and then Jenny creates them as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts for us each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. One of my favorite things about this podcast is actually hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your herbal thoughts on kava. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, hearing Beth talk about kava tincture specifically reminded me of a time that I turned to kava. So I live in eastern Washington, where wildfires are a major hazard during the summer. And one summer, a wildfire started just across the road from me. And that summer was so hot and so dry, and everything escalated really quickly. We had just minutes to evacuate our home. And I just have to admit, I was in a total state of panic. Once we made it to town, we went to the local health food store just to regroup and get news and figure out what was going on because everything happened so fast. And I was definitely still in that panicked mode. And I noticed an herb farm tincture on the shelf at the store. It was called Anxiety Soother. And I remember I had kava in it. I think that was the main herb, and also had lavender in it, and I'm sure other herbs, but that's just what I remember for now. And so, yeah, I just grabbed that off the shelf, took it. I hope I paid for it first. I was definitely not in totally mentally there, but I do remember that my entire being just immediately settled down, and I was able to feel a lot more grounded. Herbs honestly don't often affect me in the nervous system really strongly and really quickly, but that time they definitely did, and I'm still very grateful for it.